Rajasthani Reality. Bad policies for decades give urban Indians hefty subsidies on water supplied to their homes while rural Indians buy it at exorbitant rates from tankers, or drink water the color of mud from village ponds. Written by Tavleen Singh. Updated, September 30, 2018 1:05:39 p.m. Drought, farmer suicide, Maharashtra drought, Marathwada drought, Marathwada farmer suicide, NCRB, no rain, no modern technology, marginal farmers, Indian Express News, Indian Express explained. X. Why has this situation been allowed to exist for so long? Why have we not learned from countries like Israel how to find water in states that are as arid as Rajasthan? Representational image. Whenever I feel bogged down by the supposedly big issues that Indians who live in big cities become momentarily obsessed by, I travel into rural India for a reality check. I did this last week in villages that lie deep among the sand dunes of western Rajasthan and found that nobody I met mentioned Rafale or the Ram Mandar. The drought in these parts is so severe this year that what obsesses people here is how they are going to find water. The situation is desperate because the rains failed completely. Last time I wrote about a similar reality check, I was put through a full inquisition by BJP denizens of Delhi's drawing rooms and high officials in the Prime Minister's office. So this time, before going any further, I shall name the villages I visited. I went to Tulsa, Navitala, Jawharpura and Jaziran Kibari in the district of Barma, and Tilawada, Ranjapura and Chambara in the district of Jasma. On the way to these villages I drove past fields and fields of ravaged crops. The bajra, millet, crop that is yellowing in the thirsty, khaki land is now fit only for fodder. Sadly, water sources in these villages are drying up so rapidly that animals could start dying in weeks. What makes people more despondent than usual is that they know that once the election campaign begins for the Rajasthan Assembly, nobody will be interested in their plight. Advertising. Related news. Rajasthan, BJP rebel leader Ghanshyam Tiwari says his outfit will contest all seats. Ahead of polling, Modi show of strength on Jayoth turf. BJP leaders say free food makes people lazy, Rahul. The criminal neglect that has created a situation in which the poorest, rural Indians pay more for water than privileged city Indians is not new. Bad policies for decades give urban Indians hefty subsidies on water supplied to their homes while rural Indians buy it at exorbitant rates from tankers, or drink water the color of mud from village ponds. Why has this situation been allowed to exist for so long? Why have we not learned from countries like Israel how to find water in states that are as arid as Rajasthan? I do not know. What else did I discover on this reality tour? I found that Narendra Modi's efforts to drag rural India, kicking and screaming, into the digital age are not working that well on the ground. Subsidies that were easily accessed from accounts in village post offices are now being transferred directly to bank accounts so far from where the beneficiaries live that they waste a day traveling by the only bus to a bank that can be as far as 50 kilometers away. Once there, they often find that they cannot get inside because thousands of people are waiting their turn. So to collect their meager subsidies from the REGA and other grandiose government welfare schemes, they can end up spending nearly half on travel. This is without counting the loss of their daily wages. More rural banks was the demand in every village I visited. In every village I also met young men impatient for jobs. Farming and animal husbandry were the pillars of the economy, and because of the depredations of cow vigilantes, this second pillar has begun to crumble. In Muslim villages I was told that they were giving up cattle farming because they were unable to transport animals from one market to another without being waylaid by vigilantes. Another grim consequence is that the menace of stray cattle is now so huge that those who can afford to, like the Jat farmers in Jaziran Kibari, put up wire fencing around their fields. Does this grim picture indicate that Narendra Modi has become hugely unpopular? No. He continues to retain a surprising measure of popularity because he is seen as a man of integrity who, in the words of many I spoke to, is trying to repair the damage done by 70 years of bad policies. The faith in Modi is so great that many believe that even Mukesh Ambani's Jio revolution, and it is a revolution, has happened because of him. Deep in villages buried behind sand dunes, 4G is available to those who subscribe to Jio. This also means that people have a greater knowledge about the issues of the day than they did before because more and more rural people now have access to data. Another reason for Modi's popularity remaining relatively intact is because in this part of rural India Rahul Gandhi continues to be seen as a sort of clown prince. In the 2 Muslim villages I visited, there was more acceptance of him, but even here I found that people smiled when I asked if they would choose Rahul over Modi if that choice was put before them. To tell you the truth, the desperation for water is so great that I was a little ashamed to ask too many questions about political leaders. There is a water emergency that needs urgent solutions today. A UN for the people. It is too often forgotten that the UN Charter begins with the words, "We the peoples." This reflected a collective determination and optimism that was outward-looking and inclusive following from the privations and horrors of the Second World War. Written by Maria Fernanda Espinosa, updated, September 28, 2018 3:33 and 30 seconds p.m. A UN for the People United Nations General Assembly President. X. The better societies we all want to see are predicated to a large degree on building virtuous circles of economic, social and physical well-being that can lift all boats. File. As world leaders are convening in New York for the annual United Nations General Assembly, I am only the 4th woman to preside over the gathering and the first from Latin America and the Caribbean. During my mandate, I am determined to fight against all forms of discrimination, gender discrimination being one of the key priorities of my tenure. I was elected by the member states to serve their interests, and in my year of office I intend to do just that. The General Assembly is the closest that we have to a world parliament, but even as heads of state and government from around the globe gather to debate the big challenges of our times, we have to face the fact that political differences are deepening. A sense of common purpose, needed to find effective solutions to those challenges, is looking ever more elusive. Indeed, many of the multilateral agreements that the UN has painstakingly achieved in recent decades are being seriously questioned. It is too often forgotten that the UN Charter begins with the words, "We the peoples." This reflected a collective determination and optimism that was outward-looking and inclusive following from the privations and horrors of the Second World War. I strongly believe that we have to make the UN relevant to all people, while encouraging member states to recognize the shared responsibilities required to ensure peaceful, equitable and sustainable societies. Part of that process must surely be to better inform the public of the UN's key role in bringing nations together in order to get an agreement on everything from climate change to Middle East peace and from security to migrant rights. But an important part of that process is to acknowledge that, in the minds of many people, the international community has lost its way. One of the greatest challenges we now face is a widespread lack of trust in the political institutions established to serve all citizens but increasingly seen as favoring the select few. While the UN can only ever be as effective as member states want it to be, we also have to act on the reality that some of the architecture of the post-World War era needs an overhaul. Terrible conflicts continue inside some countries, with all of the destruction, degradation and misery that the UN was established to prevent. If we are to restore confidence in multilateralism and reverse the slide into isolationism, extreme forms of nationalism and xenophobia as well as an ever-present threat of violent extremism, we have to acknowledge that none of these forces arise from a vacuum. So while I want to focus much of my efforts on a range of issues from environmental action, particularly around the global scourge of plastic pollution, to ensuring the fundamental rights of persons with disabilities and prioritizing the needs of the world's 68.5 million refugees, We have to recognize the growing inequality and joblessness that is helping to fuel a real sense of frustration in rich and poor countries alike. I first became an ambassador to the UN for my country, Ecuador, in March 2008. Just 6 months later, the collapse of Lehman Brothers triggered a devastating financial crisis which recalled the collapse of the 1930s. The catastrophes of that period were largely avoided, but much of the frustration today reflects a decade-long struggle to deal with its aftermath. This lies behind a growing but dangerous view that individual nation-states can act more effectively by themselves than in concert with others. We not only need to show that multilateralism can be more effective but ensure that national policymakers have the room to mitigate the forces having a devastating effect over people's livelihoods. The better societies we all want to see are predicated to a large degree on building virtuous circles of economic, social and physical well-being that can lift all boats. This goal informed the hopes and ambitions of those who helped build the UN, and it informs my hopes and ambitions as I prepare to take office. If I can help focus global opinion and political leadership towards seeking solutions together, then I will have succeeded, I hope, in part in making the UN more relevant to those we serve,